Good to have everybody with us. The Trump base shook to its core yesterday when, as we've been talking about all day, Reince Priebus becomes chief of staff. This is one of the key positions in the Trump administration. And Reince Priebus, talk about draining the swamp. He lives in the swamp along with his other elite crony friends. Now, chief of staff, what does that mean? Don't know. I think it's going to be dependent on who they pick as chairman of the Republican National Committee. I'm for Corey Lewandowski for that job. I think you got to put movement Trump people in key places in order to have us believe that this is not going to be Washington Republican country club establishment business as usual. Here's the good news. Steve Bannon made a presidential counselor and senior advisor in an interesting press release. Joining us now to try to sort all this out, Susan Crabtree. She is a longtime member of the White House Press Corps, a White House correspondent, a senior correspondent for the Washington Examiner. She's also been with Roll Call the Hill and the Washington Times. Susan, good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. Great to be on with you again.
All right, now, Susan, let's get to, you did two pieces yesterday. One was prior to Priebus being named chief of staff, in which your piece said if he is named chief of staff, the Trump base is going to go berserk. Then you updated the piece a few hours after that and said, okay, he has been named chief of staff, but maybe the base isn't going to go too berserk today because he put Bannon in there. Can you break the whole thing down for us?
Well, my first story was Saturday night, and I started getting unsolicited calls and emails about just people up in arms over this idea that Priebus was going to be getting the nod for chief of staff. They said, this is the guy that stood in our way the whole time.
True.
They were saying that he was, basically on the ground in key states. These people that were talking to me were involved in get out the vote efforts, and they didn't run into any RNC people knocking on doors and trying to get the word out.
All true. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. So they were just sort of like, what in the world are you doing? This is putting this guy who held you to this pledge of not running as an independent. And then at sometimes during the debates, he was stacking the audience with establishment guys. They were anti-Trump people. And they said, he was part of the whole situation, whole accusation of rigging the election against Donald Trump. And now he's in the inner circle. But from what I understand, this was a decision that Ivanka Trump and her husband supported very strongly. They wanted Priebus at the top role, probably to bring the party together, a symbolic move, and also he knows how to run Washington, so run Congress, and he knows Washington like the back of his hand. So basically, that they listened to the father listened to his top advisors, mainly his family, on this move. Others, I'm sure, also pushing for Priebus. But that was Saturday night when I wrote the first piece. When they announced it about the next afternoon, the people I talked to, suddenly shifted. They liked the fact that Bannon was going to be in the top role. They weren't really pushing for Bannon entirely. They wanted Bannon, but they also thought Kellyanne Conway would be very, very good, that she deserved it after such coming in there and turning the operation into a more effective operation. They also thought that Newt Gingrich would be wonderful in the role. So, the people saying, it was Bannon or bust, that's wrong. But they did shift. They are now saying good things. They like the fact that they are going to get equal footing. This is Jenny Beth Martin of the Tea Party Patriots and others, including Rick Manning, who's a great guy from Americans for Limited Government. He really was instrumental in trying to being there for the Trump campaign from the beginning, even during the primaries where Jenny Beth Martin was not for Trump, she was for Cruz. But these people are now saying publicly that they're okay with the move. They like the fact that Bannon was announced first. That was a symbolic in the press release. Bannon's name came first as a strategic advisor, and then Priebus came later. But I think they're also, truth be told, are taking more of a wait-and-see approach. They're a little concerned that they're still concerned about Priebus in the top role.
Well, and for the right reason, because not only is everything that your sources told you Saturday night, Susan, is accurate, because we saw no evidence of it in Virginia whatsoever, either from the RNC. So not only was that accurate, but I've had sources tell me that on the day after the Access Hollywood videotape broke, right? Remember that, which was only a month ago, right? That was October 11th when that happened. On that Sunday, Reince Priebus went to Trump's penthouse and told him he had to get out of the race because he was going to destroy all the down ballot Republicans. Mm-hmm. So how you go in 1 month from abandoning your candidate and to try to get him off the ticket to being chief of staff, nobody can quite figure that out. So, look, the thing is, Susan, this is very simple here. The base that elected Trump, those like me that have been with him from day one, we ignited a movement. And so you sell that movement out, and I'm telling you, Susan, there's going to be hell to pay. I'm not sure if Trump realizes where he is in this, but if you think your calls on Saturday night were bad, that was just an appetizer to what's to come if these people get in there and try to sell out the base. The problem with Reince is he doesn't believe, and either does his friend Paul Ryan, in a single Trump principle. That's the issue, right?
Well, I think that there are a lot of things that both sides agree on. Certainly, less government spending. I mean, the broad strokes, but it is not the broad strokes that the activists like yourself and others believe won Trump this election. It was the Bannon style. We're not going to back down.
Right.
We're going to drain the swamp. And we are going to do things. Bannon was responsible, for instance, for that press conference right before I guess it was the second debate that in the late fall, where you had all of those Bill Clinton, the people, the women that he had problems with sexually, sitting right there, and that was an in-your-face style. We are not going to back down. You can say all you want about my sexual history and what the accusations against me, so I'm going to bring them up against you, and we're just going to take that issue somewhat off the table. I will tell you that this Bannon appointment has Washington Democrats losing their minds. You saw last night, you saw a tirade of tweets and just so much venom from the left. Harry Reid spokesman, just calling him a racist. He's anti-Semite. Now we have this in the White House. You are going this steady stream of just outright venom over Bannon. It's going to be interesting to watch. So it's something that the Trump camp really needs to be, concerned about and looking for. Why I don't understand why he couldn't get another consensus chief of staff up in the role. Kellyanne Conway, a woman, fabulous, would have been fabulous. Having these two, I don't know if you've had. I've had bosses that were co-editors before. Equal footing. It never works. It's a problem.
It never works. You're right.
Yeah, it never works.
It never works. And so it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Now, the only thing is, and one person told me last night that if Trump now surrounds himself with other movement people, loyalists, and so basically Reince is there to make the trains run on time, that's fine. We'll see how it plays out. Susan, let's go to the Republican National Committee, where a lot of people thought, like me, Lewandowski would get named chief of staff. He didn't. Now there's a lot of speculation that President-elect Trump is going to name Lewandowski as chairman of the Republican National Committee. We've seen that in some of the media. I think if he did that, a lot of us in the movement would say, okay, there's a good sign. Do you see that happening?
I think that the Trump team is watching this reaction to Steve Bannon being at the top, or co-partners with Priebus, and they're watching it closely. It has to come soon, but I think that decision can be put off a little bit. Now, the move. You're right. The movement that was created wanted Bannon or some. The reason why they were pushing so hard for Bannon would have been happy with Kellyanne or Newt Gingrich, but because they want to make sure that he is in charge of staffing decisions, that he gets an equal voice in staffing decisions. As you know, they have to get all of these people into the White House in a very short order. I mean, by the time that President Obama leaves office on January 20th, they have to hire 4,000 people. Mm-hmm. So they can't be. They have to move forward with the White House jobs. I think they can put off the RNC. I think the DNC is not putting off that decision for months, with Keith Ellison leading the lead candidate over there. So they need to focus on the White House right now and getting their people installed and which direction they want to take. And I don't know how they do it with opposing forces at work at the top, but it's going to be a difficult task.
Right, but the bottom line is that as the chief of staff, Reince Priebus is the chief of staff, so he has the ability to hire whoever he wants. I mean, Bannon's not going to be signing off on these, otherwise you have a powerless job. So one of the concerns is that he brings in all of the Republican National Committee elite establishment retreads like Katie Walsh and, Rick Wiley, who Lewandowski fired, and all these people that he brings all them in. And, basically you've got the Scott Walker administration or the Jeb Bush administration in there. I mean, that's the concern, is that before Bannon or anybody else can do anything, that all the most integral, influential positions in the White House are staffed by the chief of staff, and he picks all of the longtime K Street, Washington insider establishment types. And so not only you don't drain the swamp, you're actually filling the swamp up to the brim, right? I mean, that's one of the concerns.
Well, certainly that's the fear. And I think that this announcement, or this balloon that was floated, that Laura Ingraham is going to be the press secretary, might help that a bit. Laura Ingraham will eviscerate the White House press corps on a daily basis. I mean, people will watch those press conferences just for the sheer entertainment value of it, because it's going to be, she does not mince words, as you know, and she has very, very low tolerance for the kind of, shenanigans that I'm very familiar with the White House press corps. The high school, I'm in the in crowd, you're not, and we're going to get our questions first. And I mean, I think that's all going to get turned around if she's in the White House in any capacity in the comms job. So that might help. But yes, I think that the concern. I've watched the Washington game. I've unfortunately been here too long myself, and I've watched from the Tom DeLays of the world. Their staff goes to work for Mitt Romney. Then those people were were divided over Scott Walker and Jeb Bush. And they're all hanging out on K Street making a ton of money, as you know, and they're just, it's so funny to watch when somebody like Donald Trump gets elected, they're all putting their resumes in for the job. You know that.
It's absurd. Okay, so let's get to Ingraham. I mean, as you know, what the press secretary job is, it pays about, what does it pay? It pays like $100,000, something like that, right?
180, about 180.
All right, 180. So it pays 180. Laura Ingram's probably making right now about $1.5 million. All right, between her Fox News, her live set, the book she has, the speaking engagements, her syndicated radio show, she's making well over $1 million. Okay, $1.5 million, $1.6 million, $1.8 million, something like that. So you have to give that up to make $180,000. That's number one. Number two, that position, as you know, you outlined it beautifully. You do battle with the press corps, but it's not a policy decision. You're basically handed a map every day of what you need to defend the president on and what you can say. So you're not involved in policy making. You're involved in articulating and defending the president. I mean, I couldn't see Ingram in that job a month. She'd go out of her mind. So she isn't going to be the press secretary. She's not going to give her platform up. And the other thing is, as a press secretary,
I think she's okay with the money wise. I mean, I honestly, yes. I mean, I think it would be hard to see her in that role because you have to develop relationships with the press corps at some point. I looked at Jay Carney, and Jay Carney was arrogant. He was over the top rude. I don't think it helped him in the coverage. I think Josh Earnest is much more of a straight arrow. He's much more fair. He calls on everybody. He's treated me in a decent way in terms of you're getting back to me in a timely manner on email, and during the press conference he calls on me. It may be towards the end, but he calls on me. So I think that that role Laura Ingraham may not be perfect for, but it would be really fun to watch, and it would really get the conservatives and the movement people that elected Donald Trump. They would be satisfied to see that happening. And yes, it would not be a policy role, but Laura Ingraham would have an impact on that.
I mean, look, it would be entertaining and a fun thing to do. I just don't see it happening. The other reason is in that job, you then can't go out and give your own opinions on things because you're a spokesperson for the president.
Right.
So, she can't be going off and going on Fox and saying what's, so the level of freedom you give up. I mean, that's the thing, Susan, when you're on radio like me, or you do what she does, you have an unbelievable amount of freedom in being able to say and think and do whatever you want in a editorializing capacity, and then all of a sudden take that away and put you in a box. Very few people can make that transition. It's tough to do. Maybe we'll see her in that role. Certainly if we do, it'll be worth the price of admission, right? No doubt.
Absolutely. But at the same time, I don't think her media empire is something that she can walk away from that for a year. I honestly believe that. It's a choice she needs to make. But barring that, you're right. Who he puts in these senior advisor roles is going to form the direction of his presidency. Right. And you saw yesterday the reaction on the left to the Bannon hire. I have never seen anything like it.
I was in the back, Susan, talking to one of the car care service team members who was saying to me that his son is a freshman at the University of Virginia, and that the president of the university was sending out all kinds of emails saying that it was okay not to take exams for a week because he understood that you might be stressed out and you might be in grieving like someone died. When you would say, I can't take an exam this week, I had a family member die, I'm grieving. And then they have safe places for people at UVA to come and grieve together. They also have a place where you can get safety pins and safe spaces to grieve over Trump's victory and Hillary's defeat. This is at the University of Virginia. What do you think of that?
Well, I live in Northern Virginia, so it doesn't surprise me. The whole neighborhoods in Alexandria, there's a similar sentiment going on. Pity parties being organized all over the place. But the University of Virginia, that's actually, it's instituted. It is actually sad, but I'm not surprised. The universities around the country have become havens for liberalism. My own sister just said University of Oregon, which is definitely a liberal place. Her son's applying for school, and they want him to send an optional essay of why he is diverse.
Jeez, that's
and
unbelievable.
They threw it in the trash. So.
You know what? I don't know what to do. I guess the people at UVA, they need a safe space or something. The little snowflakes there, a little upset about the election. What do you think of these protests going on all over the place, Susan?
Well, I think that it is their right to. We live in a democracy. We believe in free speech. I don't think this is unhealthy, but At the same time, if it were happening on the other side, it would be deemed, sour grapes, challenging the results of the election. So we have to see this in the right lens. If Trump can say that he's concerned about it, but he wants to bring the country together, I think that people need to listen to him. He was pretty sober-minded during that interview with 60 Minutes yesterday, last night. He told people to knock off any type of, anti-Semitism, hate-mongering. He told them, he looked straight into the camera and said, stop it, So this is not something that he is supporting, and, he made that very, very clear.
Okay, just before we get off this topic, Obama, Clinton, other liberals, why have they not called for an end to this violence? Why doesn't Obama get on TV and say, hey, enough is enough. You can protest all you want. I get it. But let's not be smashing windows, loading stores, blowing up cars, throwing rocks, stopping commerce, stopping traffic on the interstate, disrupting commerce. Why no sense of outrage here from the president?
I think you have he's on his way out. He is saying, he's letting his former top aides speak for him. The people who have left the White House. It's no benefit for him to tell them to stop doing this. His top aides are going after Steve Bannon on Twitter, making fun of the president, the administration as they come in. I found it incredibly childish. Last night they were banding around a Wall Street Journal article, Dan Pfeiffer and Jesse Ferguson, two former top White House aides in the comms shop, a Wall Street Journal article that said that the administration didn't know that they had to get these 4,000 people in place by January 20th. The veracity of that, the fact that they doesn't know is just a joke. Kellyanne Conway knows her way in Washington. She's also been here, operating here and in New York for several years. I knew her back in the 90s, in the mid-90s. So, they're just seizing on anything they possibly can to try to undermine President Trump. And here it is, we do need to come. What President Obama is saying publicly is true. We do need to come together as a nation. We do not want to. We do want to support the successful administration of any president, whether you disagree with him or not. It's to the success of America is at stake here. We do have an awful fight going on with ISIS abroad. And the fact that President Trump spent so much time talking to President Obama about that, I think is a really, really good thing, and that it wasn't full of tensions.
Look, I think you're right. There's no question about it. And Trump has certainly signaled all the right tones and said the right things in order to be, quote, unquote, presidential. So let's get back, Susan Crabtree, to the Steve Bannon phenomenon. You were saying, Susan, you were talking about the liberals going bananas over Steve Bannon. Why?
Because I think that he has allowed Breitbart News, he directed Breitbart News. They truly believe this to be provocative enough to become, anti-Semite. They believe that Steve Bannon is an anti-Semite. They believe that he has spurred this white supremacist national message. And the fact is, I think that Trump is supporting him. Time will tell. But I think Trump wants him in the administration because he's pugnacious and he is anti-establishment. The problem that Donald Trump faces, as he says, I want to drain the swamp, but I have to get 4,000 people hired immediately, and we have to vet them.
Right.
He's facing a dilemma. How many people who are anti-establishment can you trust to know what they're doing and not be complete lightning rods when you get them at the White House?
Right.
He can't just. He's won. He's in a victory position now. He can't. You're not tilting at windmills anymore. You won. You got it. So it's the dog that caught the car. He ran after the car. He caught it.
Right.
Now he has to figure out, how am I going to run this administration and who am I picking? He wants he wants no lobbyists in his administration. But, where are the people that are ready-made to move into these positions? There's so many people in Washington just waiting around who have been out of power, who have experience. So he has to weigh these choices very quickly, but carefully. But he has to act quickly too.
All right, so
it's a conundrum.
He's got 5,000 spots basically to fill. And so he's got to decide, okay, in that five, I'm going to go with Reince Priebus. Hopefully he can make the trains run on time. He's got the relationships. So he's got to pick these 5,000 people. Obviously, some of them are going to be part of the swamp that he's trying to drain because they have the institutional knowledge and they've been there forever, right?
That's right. And I think Kellyanne and Newt Gingrich can help select the good from the bad eggs. They can say, are these people completely just mercenaries, or are they, would they support wholeheartedly the Trump agenda? You've got people on the transition team. You got Mike Pence running it. Mike Pence is managed to do almost the impossible in Washington. He manages to be a conservative, principled person and also be likable. He really is an amazing asset for the Trump administration, and the fact that he's in that role, he ran a state and he managed to serve that role in Congress and be likable. The press likes him. He's just the right person for the job at the right time. So I think he will be very instrumental. His staff, many of them who I know personally, they are going to be coming down from Indiana. You can bet. Many of them served in Washington, and they will be on the vetting teams. This vetting has to go very, very quickly, so that's where you have to express some concerns. There may be some adjustments down the road. He has every right to do that. He can make adjustments next year in the early part of the year if it's not going well. But yes, I think you have Newt, Kellyanne, Mike Pence's team. You've got Mike Rogers, former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He's a very smart individual on board. You got Devin Nunes, and the current chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He's on board in the transition. These are not people that don't understand the good eggs from the bad eggs in Washington.
We want to thank Susan Crabtree for being with us. Susan, senior White House correspondent for the Washington Examiner. You can read Susan. Just go to WashingtonExaminer.com. That's WashingtonExaminer.com. Susan Crabtree. Susan, thank you so much for that insight. We appreciate it. Make a prediction. Where does Corey Lewandowski end up?
I'm going to say, I think they need to wait on the RNC. I don't think it's the right time to appoint him to the RNC. If he would get that job, I don't think he's going to get that job, having with the previous signal out there. But that's not to say, he won't have a senior advisor role. You can have the wonderful thing about these White House titles is you can make these jobs into anything you want them to be. You saw that with many people on Obama's and his top echelon. They just get the senior advisor role, and that's fine. But I do think you have to have somebody in the RNC job that knows every single House and Senate race and the dynamics playing out. And I'm not sure that is Corey Lewandowski.
All right, we'll see what plays out. Susan Crabtree, thanks for being with us. Great insight, as always, Susan. Thank you so much. And we're going to continue to have you on, and I'm going to continue to hold the entire Trump administration accountable for the promises they made, especially their contract with America. I was there on the steps of the Capitol in, I'm going to say, September of 94 when Newt Gingrich had his contract with America that he rolled out. Remember that? There were like 200 people there, and that was probably, I know you're a very young woman, so you probably were just a babe in the woods when that happened. You were there with your mom and dad, Susan. You were there as a child. No. All right. Well, I was there because I'm every bit of 58, Susan, so I was there and I remembered. Thanks for being with us. I will be right back.